They've established a tradition of delivering products and services generation after generation so that all of their clients can enjoy a high quality of life. And they measure their success by how many people they've helped and by how many promises they've kept. And that is the true measure of who they are. When lives are fulfilled, their mission's fulfilled. Call Doug Wisdom today at 729-7508. Doug is located right above us here in the Wisdom Building at 802B South Main. Securities and investment advisory services are offered solely through Emeritus Investment Corporation, member FINRA SIPC. We invite you to stay tuned. We will come back and visit with Dr. Kyle Outz, and we will do that in just a moment.
I wanted to know why some people who get COVID-19 get it so bad. I found out it may be because they have a high risk factor, such as heart disease, diabetes, being overweight, smoking, and asthma. Even if symptoms feel mild, these factors can increase your risk of COVID-19 turning severe. So if you're at high risk and test positive, there are things you can do, like asking your healthcare provider if an authorized oral treatment is right for you. Learn about an option at treatcovid19.com. This message is sponsored by Pfizer.
Good afternoon. We're talking with Dr. Kyle Outz of the Dent County Veterinary Clinic here in town. And Dr. Kyle, it's good to see you in again.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. It's good to be back.
We missed you last month.
We'll be back around.
Lots of things going on this time of year, and especially you've got a lot of improvements you're making on the building, and that keeps you busy along with all the animals.
Yeah, very, very true. We're approaching finishing the lobby, and some of the other exam rooms are just about done. So surgery room is kind of finished up, and prep room is kind of finished up, and treatment area is almost done. So we're getting close.
Yeah,
close.
I got to tell our listeners, my dog really likes Dr. Kyle. When I take him in, he's always got to lean up against him, and I end up taking him more than I want to, though, because he always gets into something.
That's the case with most of them. Yeah, they seem like they have more troubles than they need.
Yeah. We talked, without you being here last month, I kind of had a list of, with Thanksgiving coming up, of some foods that are okay to give to animals and foods that are not okay to give to animals. But I'm not really an expert on that, and you are. So let's talk about that for a little bit with Christmas coming up and New Year's.
Yep. Just introductory wise, in the last 15 years, we've seen the veterinary industry, like every industry, they go through trends and they go through these focuses on certain things, and they have looked at food things in the last 15 years heavily, and there's just some new things that have come out that are helpful as far as understanding good and bad for dogs and cats eating their different foods and pet and human foods. One thing we've looked at over the years is that we have seen obesity rise in dogs and cats both, and we find that's for different reasons, but they both are doing it. On the cat side, it tends to be a situation where cats, a lot of them are indoors and they have a limited exercise amount because they do more resting and sleeping than outdoor cats that chase birds and leaves and have a lot more activity. Indoor cats seem to sleep a lot and then they eat. And the combination of that combined with to get a cat food to stay together where it's a usable product that's enjoyable for the consumer to use, it has to stay together in a little kibble, and it has to stay where it's in good mouthfeel and also good usability for the client, which means that it has to have a certain level of starch in it in order to hold together. If you don't have starch, it just crumbles into dust and no one likes it. But that starch is a higher level than what a natural cat's diet would have that eats mice and birds. There's very little starch in a mouse and a bird, except with the stomach contents of the mouse. That's about all there is. Mostly it's protein and muscle and vessels and organs and those kind of things that are high protein and some fat, but low starch. So we have an artificially high starch diet, and we have a very inactive cat, and that tends to make obesity in cats. So as far as helping that, although it's more problematic as far as the usability, canned food is better at holding weight down in a cat. It seems reversed, but that's the way it is, because canned food has a lot of water and very little. It's less concentrated than what dry food is, and when they eat that water makes them feel full, but they're not that calories, and it's just water weight. So that helps on weight on cats, and there are some lower starch foods that help a little bit. And some cats are active enough and have high enough metabolic rate they don't get heavy, but many do. So that's a quick introduction to the cat side. Dogs tend to be different. And research in dogs has very clearly shown some things that are not intuitive or not something we think of every day. That indoor feeding in dogs is cats generally go eat on their own, or they sometimes get a little bit of canned food that some people put down for them. But dogs, very often it's a more involved human interaction with the dog at feeding time. And essentially what it boils down to in the end is that many dogs attach much more to that feeding time than just, am I hungry and am I now full? That is very little part of what dogs, it's mostly about the excitement, the emotional high, and all the happy feelings about feeding time that because they're not human, they don't speak English, they don't speak sentences, they just know a few words, and they know body language and sounds and smells. They associate those things. And we tell the dog, hey, I like you, you're a good dog, here's some food for you. And
Right.
and in humans, we understand that as it's a token of appreciation. The food itself isn't the important thing, it's the token of affection to each other. A dog doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
What a dog gets out of it is every time I eat food, I get petted and loved at the same time. I get loved and petted for my eating all the time. I get petted if I eat. And so they oftentimes want that emotional high. They like to be happy, so they go eat in order to get the same feeling they've had before, and it becomes attachment of an emotional attachment and not so much a nutritional attachment. So the behaviorists who have been working on us as veterinarians to tell owners that they're telling us a few things. That number one, if a person gets a big emotional high out of feeding the dog, we're in dangerous waters. We're in a little bit of trouble. If the person's approach is, it's eating time, here's your food, you're not in danger of trouble as much there because it's just eating time, it's time to eat. But if it makes the people feel very good, they want to feel good too. And they want to feel themselves feel good by making the dog feel good. It's a very positive thing. Obesity is a highly likely result of that.
Right.
Because the person feels good and the dog feels good both.
Yeah. And, with my dog being an English Mastiff, people say, man, how much food does he eat a month? Mm-hmm. But then you probably confirm this maybe with Mastiffs. We keep a bowl full all the time, but he doesn't eat it all the time.
Right. Some don't.
Mastiffs will go by and they eat a few bites, and then maybe an hour later they may go by and eat a few more bites. But then some dogs, if you keep their food full, they're going to eat it as soon as it hits the bowl.
Yeah, and there are some social factors that affect that. Social competition will make a difference. If you have 4 dogs, they're more likely to eat aggressively than if there's only 1 dog.
Oh, yeah,
and
right.
Also,
Yeah.
if they feel like it's limited, if they get 1 meal a day and that's all they get, they tend to eat really aggressively and really heavily. But if there's food sitting out after a while, they figure out it's just going to be there. And so most dogs, if they switch from a meal to a free fed situation, take them about 2 to 3 weeks to get used to it, that it's going to be sitting out there. And they'll overeat it first, and then oftentimes they'll go back. Some dogs, labs, are famous for obesity. And we know that there is a brain connection between happiness and hunger, appetite. They tend to go together. And so very, very happy dogs often eat a little extra. It's just part of their brain wiring.
Right.
And labs tend to be pretty happy, upbeat dogs. They tend to overeat. So whenever Purina did a study on obesity effects on dogs, they chose labs because they knew they would get overweight very easily. And so
Right.
they did some studies looking at that. So one thing they came out with in the end was a fascinating study, very long study, 14-year study, a little over 14 years, looking at from birth to death, did obesity affect the dogs? Did it matter? And what they found out with in 2 groups of dogs, there was 14 in each group, 28 dogs, and each dog in one group had a litter mate in the other group. And one group was able to eat whatever they wanted, and they got heavy. One group was limited to their diet to keep them a little bit thin. And they compared 2 things, lifespan and cost of care. And lifespan, they could have stopped it at 12 and a half years because the last fat dog died at 12 and a half years, but they carried it on 2.5 more years because the skinny dogs lived longer. Ended up 14 years and 6 months, I think was the final date on it. But the cost of care of the skinny dogs was 27% of what it costs to take care of the fat dogs over their lifespan.
Really?
So much less care in them when they're thin than if they're real heavy. Now they are redoing the study now, and they're looking at average weight versus thin to see if average does okay. But when they got real heavy versus thin, the thin dogs did much better,
Right.
health-wise, weight-wise, and just longevity-wise, which that's parallel in human studies have shown the same thing. So
Now, we were mentioning Christmas coming up, Christmas meals. What are some foods that you do not want to give your dogs? And then let me go on a little further with that. I think grapes are bad for dogs, aren't they?
Grapes and raisins are put in the same category. Raisins are worse because they're so concentrated; all the moisture's out of them. So, but yes, grapes and raisins more so can affect kidneys in dogs. They can hurt kidneys in dogs. So they are considered something. And grapes would take quite a bit, but still, raisins are they're much smaller. So you're eating a lot more in a smaller amount. So, but yeah, both of them can be damaging the kidneys in dogs.
But most of the foods that you hear that are bad for dogs, if they just get a bite every now and then, it's probably not going to affect them, is it?
Most cases, that's correct. Like if they, if a dog has a teaspoon of chicken skin, every week or two, it's if they're a big dog, it's not going to matter. No, things we have to think about in these things too is what is the the pre-existing condition in the dog when we start eating something like that. Now, and if you take a coonhound that's underweight from running all night, and he gets some chicken skin that has a lot of fat in it, his body wants it. He's thin already. His body's wanting.
Right.
But if I take an overweight little lap dog and I give him a bunch of chicken skin, we may be in for pancreatitis, diarrhea. We may be in for gastritis. We may be in for problems because their body does not want it. Their body's already trying to get rid of it. They're already overweight. They don't need any other fat, and so their body revolts much more quickly.
Now, I know we're probably wanting to get onto some other topics.
It's fine.
But while I'm thinking about it, the way I understand it, chicken bones are hollow, as opposed as opposed to, say, a steak bone that has some marrow in it. Would the chicken bones, would that be more likely that they could have problems as they get it into their digestive system?
They can be troubles, yep, and a lot of it depends on how that dog eats the bones. And I'll give you an example. We've had dogs in our house, and like there are a couple of my dogs I know you can't give them a bone because they crunch it twice and swallow the whole thing.
Right.
It's gone in 5 seconds. They just crunch it and that's it. Some dogs will chew and chew and chew and chew on them until it's basically just a little dust before they ever. They don't swallow, or they just swallow a little bit at a time as dust part. And the dust type, much more small particles, mostly not a problem. But the dogs that are crunchers and swallowers, bone slivers and bone problems, two types of problems you see. You can see, blockages and bowel problems from the sharp pieces in the intestine and in the stomach. You see that sometimes, but I see them often come in with those bone pieces move on through. They'll end up kind of plug in the back part of the bowel toward the rectum, and they'll just make it form a plug, and a plug of sharp little, spiny bone pieces that get stuck back there, and then they can't go to the bathroom, and they come in painful and have a hard plug to try to get out of them.
Right.
So they can be troubles. The bone doesn't digest very readily. Parts of it will, and you mentioned that they're hollow. Long bones are all hollow to a degree, but the ends are not, and the ends are solid and have cartilage on the ends and those kind of things. But on a beef bone, the walls are much thicker, and it doesn't splinter the same way that chicken bones do as easily. So
right. Now you mentioned before we came on the air that you wanted to talk about, especially this time of year, we're getting ready to have some very cold weather. We've already had some very cold weather, but it's going to be colder and more prolonged. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So we do occasionally see dogs come in with with cold issues and just some overall general thoughts to think of as far as cold weather exposure is dog size. The smaller they are, the faster they get cold. Hair coat type. And when you talk about very short hair, like Chihuahuas and Min Pins and those kind of things, they have very little insulation on, and the little coats do help some. But also activity level, and if you get a really bouncy hyper little dog that's generating muscle heat, they can stay warm longer. Dogs that are very quiet or very slow or very low activity, they get cold easier. And the other thing is exposure time. How long are they out? And dogs that stay out all the time, it's a much bigger concern than dogs that are out for 5-10 minutes. Another concern I added to the list here in the last few years is if that dog is gotten where he's ready to come inside and he's cold, can he get back in on his own? Because when the phone rings and you get on talking to Aunt June, who haven't talked to in a year or two, and I've had it happen before, where people get on the phone for an hour and then Min Pin's outside in the snow and in 18 degrees, and they find them in the yard laying on their side, too cold to move, and so that is something that we think about is can they get on their own, or does somebody have to be there to get the door? In which case, get on the phone by the door and watch the dog while you're talking on the phone. Just don't forget about it, because that happens sometimes. We should throw in wind, because wind chill affects all of us, and it carries heat away much faster when it's windy, so that's an issue too. Outdoor dogs, you have a separate set of things to be concerned with. Is are dogs together? Can they share body heat back and forth? Are they on something that has insulating value in it? Are they on something that keeps their body warm a little bit? Are they protected from wind? And are they protected from water? Because water is wet is cold, and we know that ourselves, but
Right.
we don't deal with it too much. Where dogs do if they're outside all the time.
And once you get wet and cold, it's hard to get warm.
It is hard, and they don't come in and drink hot coffee like we do. We come in and drink hot tea or hot coffee, and we heat ourselves back up from the inside out. And a dog doesn't do that,
Right.
and so they don't have that capability.
I see a lot of times on Facebook somebody, and they have good intentions when they post it. Some of these, is it the Anatolian shepherds that are outside kind of livestock dogs? People will post it, and I know they post it out of concern, but they also post it out of not really understanding that a lot of these dogs, huskies, they're kind of meant to be outside.
Yeah, there are some dogs, and I worked with a lot of sled dogs in Alaska over the last 6 years, and those dogs you can watch them, and they are pretty unhappy above dogs that are used to it, that are bred for it, that are acclimated to it. Those dogs are pretty unhappy above 35 degrees. They when it gets 60 degrees, they're hot and they're burnt out. When I used to work with the mushers that run their sled dogs, they love to run between 15 below and about 15 degrees. That's when they want to run the best, because the dogs don't get hot, and they run good. And they like now below 15 below, it gets hard on tongues and hard on ears, and it gets hard on those things that can freeze on you. But at zero, the dogs do well, and they don't freeze up, but they're happy. They don't overheat because they're pulling loads all the time, and so they do well. They did do something years ago. There was some protesting, and they carried dog houses to all the stops along the Iditarod, and no dogs would use them. They wouldn't get in them. They wouldn't. They didn't. Yeah. Didn't know. They grew up in the snow cover them, and they stayed relatively warm even with the snow covering on there. But their hair coats and their metabolic rate is. Now, one thing we should add in too is age matters on dogs. And as the age and metabolic rate goes down, you don't look at a dog and tell that. You can't visibly see it, but the metabolic rate goes down, so their heat consumption is different.
Does it make a difference on the size of the dog house if you're going to keep your dog outside? I mean, obviously, if you've got a miniature schnauzer, they don't need a same size house that like my Mastiff would have if he was an outside dog.
It does matter, and really, there, as far as a place that keeps them protected from cold. Essentially, anything that has an open door and the only room in the house, it's not going to be very warm.
Right.
Now, it may keep them out of the wind and may keep them out of the water, and those are big things. But when you have, one quarter of your walls has a hole in it big enough to go in and out of, it's not going to be real warm. It's just not. So that's when, especially staying out of the wind and out of the rain, out of the cold, and have plenty of bedding material. That makes a big difference. And let the hair coat grow out some if they have a coat that will grow out. Then all those things help. And putting my rule of thumb when I used to train bird dogs, my rule of thumb is when it went below 40, I put 2 dogs together, and it went below 20, I put 3 dogs together, and then thickened the bedding up and got and they were outdoor dogs, but we just thickened up the bedding and put a flap on the door and put dogs together, let them sleep at the same time.
Right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to cover?
I think most of our big things for right now.
Okay. Tell us where you're located and give us your phone number. I know you've got a Facebook page because I've got you liked on my Facebook page, and I see everything that comes up.
Okay. We are at 403 North Henderson, so it's right downtown, old downtown there, near the police station, near the library there, and phone number is 729-6100. And so we're down there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. No doctor on Wednesdays, but other days we're open.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy to get an appointment. You might have to wait a little while. And another thing that I also see, and I'll ask you about it while you're here, I see this a lot on Facebook. Are there any emergency vets? Do you see emergency cases?
We have seen some emergency cases. The trouble with our farm has, as like most people, has no cell reception, so it's sometimes hard to get information. Right. And even our internet, we have it, but it's more angering than it is helpful. So it's just not ways to communicate. We're not trying to work on it. We're trying to build the house right now, so it's just there's no reception out there. So we're in town. We've seen some things when we're in town, do some things, but it's just I can't tell you for sure because we're not.
Well, plus a lot of times, what you think might be an emergency, if they get a hold of you on the phone and say, "Oh, my God, my dog is dying. I've got this going on," and you hear it and you say, "No, it's not that big of a deal. We can wait I can bring him in tomorrow, and we'll take care of it.
Over 20 something years of doing emergencies, and we've done them for a long time. Probably, half of the calls are what it consider non-emergency, where they really upset by the look of this worm, but it's probably a tapeworm, and it's dog's not even acting sick, but it really freaks somebody out, so they call at midnight.
Right.
So, or that dog is kind of in bad shape, and he's been slowly getting worse for the last 6 weeks, and now he's really bad.
Yeah.
And so some of those when you
So it might have been something if we'd have called
6 weeks ago.
I called several weeks ago and just made a routine appointment.
Yeah, we do get a lot of those. And so, and those things are sometimes bad things. Sometimes if you catch it early, I can do a lot more about it than if it's if it's just fading out in the last little bit, and it's emergency then.
Well, I'll tell you the thing that amazed me about your clinic was when my dog had a little injury and you used the laser on him. That's completely healed up now, and you can't even tell where it was at.
I kind of jumped on the laser idea early, about probably 15, 16 years ago now. It's been a long time. It was early when I got one, and I was pretty skeptical, but it didn't take long to see that this does some really neat things, and I've been using it since then, and for a lot of different things. No side effects to it, but it helps a lot of different things: soreness, swelling, pain in some situations, speeds up healing. And there's just, in fact, that's measurable. People have done research and shown proof that it speeds up healing, and skin wounds heal about twice as fast as normal. So we use it on a lot of, if we do fracture repairs, we use it on those things. We use it on bad ears. We use it on sometimes bladder situations where you have inflamed bladder in cats. So it's been really neat. No side effects. It doesn't hurt anything. That's big for us on our side. That they, I have to give a pill. I say, watch it doesn't vomit or have diarrhea, because this sometimes cause some. But with that laser, it just doesn't hurt anything. It's no side effects, but it helps a lot of things. So it's been neat. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's give your phone number one more time.
All right, we're 729-6100. Right down there, say on 403 North Henderson. And I've been in that same location for a long time.
And kind of full disclosure to our listeners, we may start recording this program because of kind of your schedule that you've got going on, but you are still, if you're listening to the program, you're still more than welcome to either send a question to us through email at info@ksmoradio.com. You're welcome to drop off a question here at the station, write it out, drop it off. You're welcome to call in and talk to one of us and leave a question, and we'll get it to Dr. Kyle, and he'll be more than happy to answer it for you. Now, some questions not going to be able to answer without seeing the animal, probably, but we will try to get an answer to that. So there you go.
Fair enough. Well, I appreciate it. We will put y'all here pretty soon.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, and we will talk to you next month as well. And I don't know if it'll be probably after Christmas, so I'll go ahead and wish you a Merry Christmas and
appreciate it, you too.
And a good New Year and all that kind of good.